begin the current Daf Masech Daf Yomi. We begin on the second line down at the top of the Yomid, where we continue the theme of the previous Daf, which was discussing the halacha of the previous Mishnah, that we said that one is not allowed to do according to everyone tefillas kelim Yom. We have four different interpretations of why a person cannot table a kli on Yom Tov. Now the Gemara continues on a related vein of this halacha. Just goes by the Bekazach and the Cheskel to end them Daf Achaim. We're joining for today's Daf. Some of these we're going to discuss in today's Daf are regarding Herb Shemesh, how that relates to the Tahara process for a person or Kli that was tummy, which that means that you have to wait for sundown. Regarding the Kabbanis of every Chag, there's three different Kabbanis. There is Oilas Re'iyah, which is a carbon oil, totally burnt sacrifice, which is for the Re'iyah of Yidol Kol Zechurcha, that you have to come and show yourself all your males and Mother Hashem. Shama Chagiga is a Shlomim, which that's an important difference in our Daf regarding what's a oil, what's a Shlomim. A Shlomim is that which is eaten partly by the owners, and that's a chagiga to celebrate the Yom Tov. And then the Shami Simcha, which is a very different type of a shlamim, although it's also a shlamim, but that's like Simcha Yom Tov as flesh. It's a carbon, but it's primarily there for the Simcha of Yom Tov. The halacha bal ta'acher is actually something we're going to discuss at length in the next Masech of Rosh Hashanah. But how much time must elapse before one is over? There's a prohibition of delaying your carbon that you have to bring that we're going to discuss in today's daf when that expiration date is. So the key terms of accounts we're discussing today's daf are chabura. When someone wants to bring a Korban Pesach, he has to be part of a chabura. Smicha is the halacha that says in the pasuk with Samach Yod al Rish Karbana that when you're going to bring a carbon, you have to lean on that carbon. Bal Ta'acher is this halacha, like we said, like Sa'achar L'Shama, you're not delay bringing your carbon. So begin the card Daf Yomi. Begin the second line down at the top of the Yomid. Says the Gemara like this. Tarmal in the Beitzah, again, we'll continue on this theme of tefillas kelim that we said in the previous Mishnah, that you're not allowed to table on Yom Tov. So the Beitzah says like this: Kli shenit me'erev Yom Tov. We have a vessel became tummy from before Yom Tov, and we said this in the previous daf that you're not allowed to table on Yom Tov. Moreover, says the Tanakama, ein matfil noise ben hashmoshes. You cannot table it by ben hashmoshes. Why not? Because ben hashmoshes is twilight. We know it might be nighttime. Comes out, you're tabling on Yom Tov. Ain't not tabling on Yom Tov. So ben hashmoshes nuch shkia is already included in this isser of tabling. Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, he says interesting. He says af b'choyel. Says even during a weekday you can't table ben hashmoshes. Meaning, if we see someone that going to table is going to the kelim mikvah by ben hashmoshes, the halacha is we have to go ahead and send them back and protest and tell them no, you can't table now. Why not? Mitten devach. It should tzarich harav shemesh because you need to have sundown. Now, this guy's tabling his kli ben hashmoshes. It might be nighttime. Now his intention is he wants to use it that night. And he's not going to realize he's going to have to wait for the Herb Shemesh of tomorrow. So the guy's coming, but noch shkiat, that's it, Ben Hashmoshes, you can't come and table now anymore. So Tanakam is saying Yom Tiv because it might be Yom Tiv, the Isser of our Mishnah of Tefillah be Yom Tiv. He's saying even during the weekday you can't table. Because, no, the guy's going to think he could use it later tonight. No, it might be nighttime and you really have to wait for the next day for because you have to wait for Herb Shemesh, which you didn't have yet. You only have it after tomorrow night. You can't even tell him the weekday by Ben Hashmoshes. So the Gemara actually asks and says, "Tanakama by Herb Shemesh." What? So what's with the Tanakama? That he doesn't require sundown. Why does he let you table during a twilight on a Wednesday, on a weekday? You shouldn't let him table because he's going to use that night. So Amar Rabba says, "Ashkechasinu l'Rabbanan Beidav." He says, I encountered the rabbis of the students of the Beis Medrash. The Asvakami, they were saying the following answer to the question. They said, "B'machshavtei nikeres mitech meisav kamifliki." The machlekes here in this brisa was regarding if you could recognize a person's thoughts from his actions, which we know actions speak louder than words. It indicates what a person is thinking. Where this guy is running quickly, could we recognize what his intentions are? As the Gemara explains, the case told that he's holding a vessel in his hand, as this picture is just so beautifully, so I have to just point that out. The guy is holding his case kli, this rabbinic guy, and he's running. Get a close up, right, with the rabbi running with it's actually not a rabbi, as we'll see in a second, but the guy's running and he's going ben hashmoshes to quickly get to the mikveh. So what's the machlekes? Marsa the Tanakama held like this. Why is the guy running? He obviously knows that you have to get in shkiyah by sundown. That's why he's running. He thinks he's going to have time before the day is over. Now when he sees he didn't get there in time, okay. So he's going to go on Tayvlet, but he'll wait to using until Harb Shemesh tomorrow. So therefore, Beinas Mashas of Yom Tov is Aser. That's because of you Tayvling on Yom Tov. That's unnecessarily, or that you're not allowed to because it's Yom Tov. Different Gesayis and what Rashi is saying, but during the weekday we don't protest because we know what he's thinking. We know he needs Harb Shemesh because that's why he's running. So why should we stop him? He's gonna wait for the following night. But Martha Shazuri held no. Because of his work he's running. I mean, a lot of people are torrid. A lot of people are running and stressed out or whatever. Therefore, this guy's running. So the machlekes is: do we recognize from his action if he knows the halach of Harb Shemesh or not? Tanakama says yes. Rabbi Shloimy says no. He could be running for a different reason. That's what the rabbis told Rava, the students, the yeshiva bachim. They told Rava this text. And Rava said he told them no. Regarding if a person's thoughts you recognize from what he's doing, what he's thinking, no one disagrees, that most definitely it would be recognizable by a regular person that he's running because he wants to make Harb Shemesh. So, therefore, normally you wouldn't have to stop him according to everyone. Ki pligi, the machlekes of the person that Reb Shimon Shazuri disagrees about, and he says, no, we don't necessarily know from his actions that he's thinking, I have to make Harb Shemesh, and therefore Shimon Shazuri says even during a weekday you don't let him type them. Their case is Kagoin de Tami, where the halacha is that he has another vessel that became Tameh, bepachas mikadasha, from a sheretz less than the size of a lentil. So he has another kli, another vessel. Also came in front of the rabbis, he comes to the Rav and he asks, that the pachas mekadashi tami eloi, I had a bug in my house, a dead sheretz, and it was less than the size of a lentil. Did it become tami or not? Oh, so that's what the machlekes says. Why? What shaykhs? So the Gemara explains. Rabbi told them. He says, Marsa Reb Shimon Shazuri held midahola gomer for the fact that he didn't know the halacha that a sheretz is only tami the size of an adasha. He didn't realize. He comes to ask the shaila. So Harb Shemesh nami legomer. So he obviously, so we could assume that he also doesn't know the law of waiting for sundown. Okay, such a person comes to the mikveh sisari, the kel mikveh is closed, ready noch shkia, after sundown, you can't come in anymore. No. Yes, he doesn't know the halacha that a share is not matama less than the size of a lentil, because it doesn't say explicitly in the Torah about this share kadasha. But Harb Shemesh, but regarding sundown, which is explicitly written in the Torah, gomer, he does know the halacha, which Rashi just points out. We must be talking about a kohen who wants to use for truma, and therefore you have to wait for Harb Shemesh, because if it's chulin, there's no problem about Harb Shemesh. So once you table, that's going to be okay. But al kaponim, that is the machlekes, says Rava, between Reb Shimon Shazuri and the Tanakama. Do we say once he doesn't know one halacha, does that mean he doesn't know the other halacha too?
If it's a kohen, Kahanim reason, and we're not goyzer, so we should be goyzer that you shouldn't be allowed to say.
Yeah, it's a good question. Good question. According to that pshat that Rashi said that they know the differences, and here it sounds like that he won't know. Right?
Yeah, the Gemara says here.
Right, pshat is what his reason means. Rashi had two pshat moment. It doesn't mean that they know the halacha differences between them. We're not going to be concerned that he's going to confuse the av with a vlad, or that stam it's l'mizla shchich is a concern for a tara. Here, this person sounds like that even if he is a kohen, but he's already creating a reyes because you don't know kadusha. Okay, you don't know Harb Shemesh either. You know, you already. If you would have been quiet, maybe we would have assumed that you're running because you know the halacha. But you, the same guy that came earlier, asked the shaila, and you said you don't want to know what's with my other kli less than adusha. Is it tamei or not? If I that's machlekes. We're going to say that if he doesn't know this, he doesn't know that, or do you say that no, one is explicit written in the Torah and the other one is not written explicit in the Torah? Now, we said in the Mishnah, umad bilin migav legav. And we said that you could toivel on Yom Tov a kli if it's from gav to gav. What does it mean from gav to gav? So the Gemara explains. What is this case of from gav? Gav means like related to or something like that, like on the back of this to that. So what does that mean that you're allowed to? I thought you were allowed to on Yom Tov. So the Beitzah says like this: Haretzalas is gitoy. Someone wants to make his wine press al gav kadoy based on what he had for his pitcher. Meaning, if let's say someone had his kalim or tummy, and he toibled them initially, the first time, because he wanted to use them for what's called kadoi, for his pitcher that he was going to press with the olives. Then he changed his mind, and he wants to use it for his wine press. Or let's say the other way around. Same thing, but the reverse. V'kadoi agav gitoi, where he originally wanted to use it for his wine press, changed his mind, he wants to use it for the olives. So that's what the Mishnah is saying. Oisa, you could use it for your wine press, based on the tevilah that you had done originally that you want to use it for your olives, and you don't have to go ahead and tevel it again for the purposes of using it for your wine press. Now, this time, if you're teveling a second time, you're coming to be stringent on yourself and tevel it. That's what I'm saying. Such a tevilah you can do on Yom Tov, because it's not technically over here. It's not a tevilah. You don't need it. You know, you're saying, oh, machshuvas gahat. You know, I'm saying kavunas for the olives and versus, you know, for the.
It has to be a tevel for a certain purpose.
No, that's what I'm saying. You don't have to.
So what?
But this guy's saying, I originally did it for this. Now I'm using it for something else. I'm going to tevel it again because I want to make sure. But that's what the Gemara is saying. There is no such. You want to know what this guy's having, why this guy's doing it? It's maybe because if he wants to have it at chaves. There are certain things that we have that you could have elevated statuses if you had in mind for Masa versus Tim or whatever.
It's basically a tefillah shel l'soila.
Mm-hmm. Yes, like Rosh Hashanah, it's unnecessary. But this guy wants to do it. So it's it is of a mala because it is focused, but it's not necessary, and therefore saying that you could do such a thing on Yom Tov. Now, what's the other case of the Mishnah? Case of mechabur l'chabur. What does it mean that you could do it from one group to another group? So a similar halacha. Let's say he was part of one group for Korban Pesach. He was tamei, or his vessels are tamei. So he tabled it for the purposes of joining this chabura. But then he wants to go eat another chabura. He wants to go to Morocco. He wants to go to Orlando. He's going somewhere else, switching chaburas. So he wants to do Korban Pesach somewhere else. So Harshus biyadai, halacha is he doesn't have to go ahead and toivel his kalim again. So that's what the Mishnah is saying, that if he's coming to be machmer and toivel his kalim again because he's now joining a different chabura, he could do that tevilah on Yom Tov because you don't have to. So since it's tevilah shenitzricha, it's not considered masak and anything, not really fixing any kli. And again, it's similar to the halacha of megav legav, where you're not table kli on Yom Tov, but when it's unnecessary, you're not really fixing anything. So it's like washing in the sink your bowls, and therefore it wouldn't be a problem about tick.
I think from Shaitan is because he thinks that this he's doing.
Oh, so I mean that's you would have thought to say because he thinks that therefore.
He thinks it's a tikkun one.
So that's why you would have thought
Yeah.
that would be a problem. Very, very nice. Oh, so now the Mishnah continues with the next Mishnah regarding this theme of that we had in the first parak, and regarding Eichel Nefesh and Yom Tov, which we know that's one of the big differences of this Masechta, Masechta Beya from Masechta Shabbos, Erev, the halacha of Eichel Nefesh that permitted on Yom Tov. So our Mishnah discusses this in one application. We have a machlekes, which just as a short introduction, as we said in the introduction, the karbanas hachag is three different karbanas. Eilis Re'iyah is based on the pasuk Shosh B'Mashani Yirah Chol Zechurcha. That's what we call it Re'iyah. As Pinesh Mekechel Yirah as Panei Rekem. You can't come empty-handed. You have to come in Eilis Re'iyah. Sham Chagiga is v'Chagoysim is Chag LaHashem. You have to make a Chagiga celebration on the Yom Tov. And Sham Simcha is a different pasuk. B'Zavach L'Shalom V'Chad Hashem B'Samach L'Shem Hashem Mekechel. Ain't Simcha Ela B'Busa. So those are the three different types of karbanas a person would bring on a Yom Tov. Now, regarding these karbanas, there's a machlekes. B'Shamayim they say Mevi and Shlamim. You could bring a shlam on Yom Tov because a shlamim, a person eats from those karbanas, and you're allowed to do malachas v'echel nefesh. But they ain't semchen aleim. You cannot lean on those karbanas, which although generally you're supposed to lean on the karban before, because leaning on the animal is forbidden because of Isad Rabbanan. Because smicha was done with a person's all his might, and that's considered mishtamish b'ba'al chayim. And the Mishnah teaches later on the V'lam V'lam you're not allowed to ride on an animal on Shabbos and Yom Tov. And therefore you can't lean on the animal because it's like you're leaning on it and you're putting all your might on that, and therefore you don't do smicha on Yom Tov. So again, Bishama says you could bring a shlamim, but not smicha. Avalo oilas. But oilas you don't even bring, except for like a karban tamid and masaf, which those are karban tzibur and have a set time. So that you're allowed to do on Shabbos and Yom Tov. But a person's private oila, you don't bring because you don't have the het of echel nefesh. No one's eating. Oil is totally burnt on the mizbech. And it says in Shmeisid Beis, as the Gemara explained for Beishama, it says malacha ya'asa lachem, which is lachem alei ligvaya. It's only for you that you can do malacha, but for Hashem, no, you can't do. So Beis Shammai said Shlamim, not Oila, and even the Shlamim, you don't do Smicha. Beis Hillel, they disagree on both points. No, Mavin Shlamim the Oilas, not only Shlamim, but you bring Oila too, and Beis Shammai, and you do Smicha. So on both these halachas, Beis Hillel disagrees on Beis Shammai. Now, Amar Ula. Ula now goes and he qualifies this machlekes. He says machlekes of our Mishnah, that both of them agree that you're allowed to bring a shlamim, and they only disagree b'shamei chagiga lismoich. By the shamei chagiga, which the shlamim you have to bring every Yom Tov, the machlekes is regarding do you lean on it or not. That's one machlekes they had. And ba'olis re'iyah likarev. The second machlekes was regarding the oilis re'iyah, you have to bring a carbon oil for every Yom Tov. That's a machlekes if you sacrifice it. What's the reason for the machlekes? So Ula explains. The Beis Shammai Sabri, Beis Shammai held, in other words, Beis Shammai agree that you bring the shlamim because it's a chayves hayom. As the Gemara says, a chagigah of Testament Aleph, it says in the pasuk in the Yikra, "V'chagoysim oisay chag l'Hashem," that you should celebrate it a Yom Tov to Hashem. Now, therefore, you have to bring it on Yom Tov. Now, regarding the oila that they disagree, that Beis Shammai says you don't even bring it, it's regarding the oila shre'iyah that they disagree. You know why? Because the dik of the pasuk is chagigah. Yes, chagigah is what you bring for Hashem. Oila shre'iyah loy, but the oila shre'iyah you don't bring. This that Beis Hillel says that you do bring the oila shre'iyah is because the oila shre'iyah is a Yom Tov carbon, and the Beis Hillel Sabri, when it says in the Torah Lashem, it means kol del Hashem, whatever's for Hashem. Which really we learn off in the pasuk of Lo Yirah Panei Rekam, that we know there's such a chiyuv of oilas re'iyah, but Lashem is telling you that whatever's for Hashem you're going to bring on Yom Tov. Now, that's the two cases that they disagree about, meaning regarding smicha on the shlamim and bringing the oilas re'iyah. Av nadam and nadavais, but regarding a donated carbon that a person brings, or he made a neder to bring a carbon, that doesn't even have a set time to bring it on Yom Tov. Oh, there says Ula Devakol Ein Krev Yom Tov. Everyone, even Basil, agrees. You're not going to bring it on Yom Tov, even if it's a shlamim, which you're going to eat from, and for sure an oilo, because you could bring it at a later point in time. Now, although that the carbon chagig and the re'iyah, you could make up for it all 7 days. So this has a set time. It doesn't have to be today. Tumid has to be today. The mitzvah has to be today. What do you mean? What's highest? You could bring it today by the shamei chagiga. Beis Hillel lets you bring the shamei chagiga and the oilas re'iyah because something of an oinus might happen, and you might not bring it any one of the other days. And the Mishnah teaches Masechet chagiga that once the Yom Tov passes, you're not chayiv anymore to bring it anymore, and you can't bring it. And actually, that's how Bryce is going to explain later on. That's the reason why Beis Hillel lets you bring the oilas re'iyah, because it's not really set time. You could bring it a Chol Hamoed, you could bring it all 7 days. So what's the head to bring it today? It's no Oichel Nefesh, not a set time. It is still considered a set time because it's a limited time frame. Simply the Beis Hillel says you're allowed to bring it on Yom Tov, and that's how they're interpreting the La Hashem to say that it's including that of the Kol Hashem, which is including the Oilas Re'iyah, but it's excluding the Nadar and the Davis according to everyone. And he says Nadar and the Davis, a donated or vowed carbon, increment Yom Tov according to everyone, and I'll bring that on Yom Tov. However, the Gemara asks, Meisvei. The Gemara brings a Bryce. Amr B'Shem Lasser. He says, Lo nechleku Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. He says, no, there's no machlokes Beis Shammai Beis Hillel al oila she'ena shel Yom Tov. What's an oila that's not a Yom Tov oila? Like a neder nadava. You bring a nadava, you totally burn carbon. Says Reb Shimon ben Elazar, no one disagrees. She'ena kreva b'Yom Tov. You cannot sacrifice on Yom Tov. Now the reason for this is the way Rashi explains, is because there's two problems for this case. There's no achilas adam when it's oila, so there's no oichel nefesh, and it's possibly done at a later time. It's not something that's unique to today. So since everyone would agree by the Nadam and the Davis that it's not brought on Yom Tov. That's one thing. Then the other extreme, that also the shlamim shein shel Yom Tov. Now, if let's say it's a shlamim that is of Yom Tov, for example, the shamei chagiga and the shamei simcha, which it's a shlamim and it's supposed to be brought on Yom Tov, everyone's going to agree shekirev me Yom Tov, that it is brought on Yom Tov. Which here, as Rashi also explains, says because here you have what's called tarti later. You have two reasons why it should be permitted. First of all, people are eating from it, oichel nefesh, and the set time is to be on Yom Tov. And once you miss Yom Tov, you can't bring the carbon anymore. So those two cases in the extremes, everyone agrees to that the Nadam and Davis you don't bring, and the shlamim shal Yom Tov you do bring. Zaman nechleku. So Rabbi Shloimy said, what is a machlekes b'sham v'sil? Al oila shishal Yom Tov. Regarding an oila that's of Yom Tov. And, one more case, Val shlamim she'ena shal Yom Tov. And regarding a shlamim that's not of Yom Tov. That is the case, says Rabbi Shimon Lazar, that we have a machlekes on. Now, what's the machlekes? Shebishamei oimrim lo yavi. Shammai says you don't bring it. Bisil oim yavi. Bisil says that you do bring it. That is how Rabbi Shimon Lazar explains that when you have one going for you and one going against you, that's going to be the machlekes b'Shamai and Bisil. But one thing, says the Gemara, that's difficult on Ulam, is we see that shlamim that are the Dharm and the Davos, according to Beis Hillel, you're going to bring. Because that was he said shlamim she'ena shal Yom Tov, meaning regarding Oilas Re'iyah, so that we said that is the machlekes, that you bring, we said the machlekes, everyone agrees, machlekes b'Sham Beis Hillel. But the second case of a shalmei nedava, which that's how you're describing shlamim she'ena shal Yom Tov, that you're telling me, meaning by oilas, oila is very important. When you said nedam and nedav, everyone agrees you don't bring it, that was by an oila, because it has two flaws with it. It's not shal adam, it's not set time, so everyone's not going to bring it. But shlamim she'ena shal Yom Tov, but the second case of B'Shimon Lazar says that B'Sham Yisrael disagree, because it's just like the case of oilas re'iyah that we have machlekes B'Sham Yisrael, right? Because oilas re'iyah, you have chad le'atera, chad le'isura. One reason why you shouldn't bring it because it doesn't have a chilas adam. One reason why you should because it has zman and beregel. And Bissell says, okay, so you bring it. Shalmei Davis says, B'Shimon the same thing. One reason why you should, yes, bring it is because of chilas adam. One reason why you shouldn't is because you can bring it at a later time. It doesn't have to be brought today. And we see B'Shimon says, according to Bissell, you do bring it. That's the B'Kal Ula, who said that no, that the Dharm and the Davis, Evan agrees you're not going to bring it on Yom Tov, even if it's a shlamim. He only said the machlekes is by Shamei Chagiga, but by Shamei Nedava, a shlamim she'en shal Yom Tov, you wouldn't bring. So it seems to be contradicted from Rabbi Shloimy Lazar. So it's Gemara, no, Torah Tzvei Mahachi. You have to resolve and say like this. You have to read the Beitzah differently. The Beitzah is actually going to be different text. And that is, Amr Rabbi Shloimy Lazar says, Lo nechleku b'sham misil al oila v'shlamim she'en shal Yom Tov. No, there's no machlekes. Not only oila, if you're noticing the words are changing over here. Originally we said the version of the Beitzah, the Rabbi Shloimy Lazar says they don't disagree on the oila she'en shal Yom Tov. That's not brought. But shlamim she'en shal Yom Tov, he said was the machlekes. The Bissell did permit. This version is changing it, and he's saying that they don't disagree on oila v'shlamim she'en shal Yom Tov. Both of them she'en krev b'Yom Tov. You don't bring on Yom Tov because again it doesn't have a set time. It doesn't have to be today. And the other way around, Vashlam Shein Shal Yom Tov, and no one disagrees when it's a shlam of Yom Tov like Shalmei Chagiga, Shekurev Yom Tov, it is brought on Yom Tov. Aman Nechelku, regarding what case do they disagree? Al Oilash Ishal Yom Tov, that's the one case they disagree. Regarding an Oila of Yom Tov. Shebishamayim Lo Yavi, Bishamay say don't bring it, Bisil Am Yavi, Bisil says that you do bring it. Again, therefore it's not difficult on Ula, because he's switching around the wording of the Beitzah. And he's saying that actually no, they don't disagree regarding Shlam Shein Shal Yom Tov. In that case, you would not bring it according to everyone because it doesn't have to be brought today, even though it has a chilas adam. That's one approach. Another approach, Rabbi Yosef Ami says, Tanoi Shaklet Me'alma? What? You took away all the Tanoim from the world, but you can't find any Tana that says like Ula that Ula could say that he holds like that Tana, that you have to go ahead and totally distort this Brisa to resolve it to be like Ula? And the words were pretty clear that Rabbi Shloimy Lazar was not like Ula. He was saying straight up that the machlekes is not only Oilas Re'iyah, but also Shalmei Nedava. So rather says Rav Yosef, Tanai, it's a machlekes Tanaim, and we find other Tanaim that say like Ula. It's not difficult. The Tanya, like we learned in a Beitzah, the Beitzah says Shlam Habon Machmas Yom Tov. Shlam they come because of Yom Tov. Shalmei Chagiga, Shalmei Simcha, Be Yom Tov and Yom Tov. So everyone agrees you bring it, but as we mentioned in our Mishnah, as machlekes b'Shamayim they say Somech Aleim Erev Yom Tov. Like we said in the Mishnah, that according to Beishamai, you cannot do the smicha on Yom Tov. So in this Bryce it says, what do? Is that you do the smicha on it from before Yom Tov, and then Meshach Yom Tov, but you can check it on Yom Tov. B'Silam they say, No, Samech Alei Yom Tov, like the seven Mishnah, you could even do Samicha on Yom Tov, and Meshachtim Yom Tov, and you could shecht it on Yom Tov. Now, it's continuing with Beis. That's not yet the main part, or we brought in the Brisa. Of the Dam and the Davis. But regarding the Dam and Davis, they were called Ein Kerevim B'Yom Tov. And what are you talking about? You're talking about Shlomim. Right? And this Brisa was talking about Shlom Haba Machzim Yom Tov. And you're saying that Shlom that in the Dam and the Davis, you don't bring on Yom Tov. And Ula, that was saying, he was saying like this Tana that says, yes, Shalom and the Dava are not Kerevim B'Yom Tov. But you're right, Shimon Lazar was not like Ula, so it's not difficult on Ula. Ula was going like this Tana, and Shimon Lazar is not like him. Now the Gemara continues on this theme. It says actually, Bahani Tanoi, the Tanoim that we're going to shortly quote, they disagree, Ki Hani Tanoi, like the Tanoim that we mentioned before, that regarding the Dam and the Davis of Shlamim, if you go ahead and you bring it on Yom Tov, it's a Machlekes Tanoim, like we just said. What's this Machlekes Tanoim? Like learn the price. Eimavian Toida b'Chag HaMatzos. You cannot bring a Toida, which is a Thanksgiving offering. Someone was saved from a tzara, he went overseas, so he brings a Toida Thanksgiving offering, and the carbon Toida, besides the animal, there's also 40 breads. Now, the halacha is that 10 out of the 40 are chametz, and therefore you can't bring it on Chag HaMatzos, on Pesach, because it says Al-Talas Lechem Chametz, it says in Miyukar Perek Zayin, that it has chametz bread, so obviously you cannot bring it on Pesach. And v'loy ba'ad tzeres, neither can you bring the carbon toida on Shavuos. Why? Nishu Yom. And toida is a neder and the dava, meaning it's a neder or in the dava that the person is bringing, and it's like a shlamim which you don't have to bring, and therefore you cannot bring it on Yom Tov. Avol maybe adam toidasa b'chag Sukkos, but a person could go ahead and bring his carbon toida on Sukkos. How so? I thought you can't bring it on Yom Tov. There's no cholamayit on Shavuos, and Pesach he can't bring it because of chametz. Shimon Aimer, which the Gemara is going to shortly explain what he's saying. He says, the pasuk says in Devarim, b'chag HaMatzos, b'chag Shavuos, or b'chag Sukkos. What does that mean? Kol sheba b'chag HaMatzos, whatever could be brought on Pesach, b'chag Shavuos, b'chag Sukkos, could be brought on Shavuos and Sukkos. Whatever cannot be brought on Pesach, cannot be brought on Shavuos and Sukkos, which sounds like from his words simply, it sounds like since you can't bring the Toida on Pesach, because it's chametz, cannot be brought on Shavuos and Sukkos. But we'll see shortly how the Gemara explains what he's saying. He says, maybe a person could bring his Toida on Sukkos, which the Gemara is ultimately going to explain is not just on Chalash HaMoed, like the Tanna Kama said, it's even on Yom Tov itself. And when you bring your Toida on Sukkos, you're also going to be including and fulfilling your obligation of Shalmei Simcha. Now the problem is, as Rashi points out, you already made yourself obligated in this carbon Toida. How can you use that from a chiyuv to fulfill a different chiyuv of Shalmei Simcha? Because the halacha generally is when you're mechuyev in something, you can't use something else that's mechuyev, has to become from unconsecrated funds. Still says Rashi, the Beitzah teaches in Chagiga Daf Chesam and Alf, it says in Torah, B'samachta b'chagecha, which comes to include all types of simchas of meat for the simcha of Yom Tov. So it doesn't say anywhere in the Torah, Havesa shlamim b'chalta sham b'samachta. It doesn't say you have to bring a shlamim and to rejoice, it says you should rejoice. So if you're getting it from eating some other flesh from your carbon taida, that's okay. You don't have to bring a special designated carbon for your shalmei simcha. But what we do know is that as long as the Beis Hamikdash was around, ain't simcha elabasa, the joy was only with meat, like it says in regarding har gerizim, but we compare it to the Yom Tovim because it both say b'samachta. It says b'samachta shlam b'chalta sham b'samachta, and it doesn't say, however, that you have to bring a shalmei simcha on Yom Tov. But it's just that the simchas Yom Tov lets you have b'chayris or ma'aseh behema. You don't have to bring a special shlamim of a shalmei simcha. So therefore, you can fulfill your obligation of simcha. But Reb Shimon points out very importantly, but the ein yitzba mishum chagiga. But you're not going to be fulfilling your obligation of chagiga. Why? Because chagiga is what's called davar shebachayvahu. It's an obligation. 2 karbanos you have to bring, specifically them, oilas re'iyah and shalmei chagiga, is an obligation. And even if you have other meat from elsewhere, you still have to bring it. Now, what's called anything that's an obligation can only come from chulin. This taida that you're already mechuyev in it is not chulin, and therefore you cannot exempt your chagiga with the taidas. Although you already have meat, it doesn't make a difference. You have to bring a special carbon of shalmei chagiga. In contrast to shalmei simcha, if you have meat elsewhere, you don't have to bring a special carbon. Therefore you fulfill your obligation with the taida. Okay, that's the Beitzah. But we're going to first explain the Beitzah, and then we'll show how the machlekes tanoim that we mentioned before of the dam and the davis, if you bring it on Yom Tov or not, is the machlekes of these tanoim here in this Beitzah, as the Gemara explains. So the Tanna Kama said, "Ein mavi'in toida b'chag hamatzos." No, you cannot bring the korban toida on Pesach, the chametz Shabbat, because of the chametz that's inside. So the Gemara says, Pshita, although we all know that you can't have chametz on Pesach, every little kid knows that. So what do you tell me you can't bring a toida because of that? So some say, I says, you're right, but actually not talking about Pesach, we're talking about Erev Pesach, the 14th of Nisan. So why can't you bring it then? Besides you'll have chametz. Oh, but the Tanna Kama holds you're not allowed to bring that a carbon will come to be invalidated prematurely, because you're going to be minimizing the amount of time that you could eat it, because you can only eat chametz up until 4 hours into the day. Oh, and from that point on, the chametz part of the carbon is going to be nicer, and you're going to be causing it to be invalidated early. That's the halacha. The Tanna Kama is saying you cannot bring your toida on Erev Pesach.
Like today.
What?
Like Erev Kippur.
Like Yom Kippur, right? That we don't meaning what? Right. Yeah. Right. Exactly. V'lei ba'atzeres, and not on Shavuos, Neshu Yom Tov, because it's Yom Tov. Oh, what's that about? Ksava, he holds the Dam and Davis in Krevin b'Yom Tov. So this is like Ula, the way he interpreted the Mishnah, as we brought a Tana that says like him too, that even though it's a shlamim, Toida is a shlamim, you cannot bring it on Yom Tov because it's a ned and a dava. So we have Tana number 1 of the Tanai that says like that version, like Ula, that you cannot bring Nadar and Davas on Yom Tov. Now we'll continue explaining and we'll see the other Tana. Avol maybe Adam Toidas b'Chag Sukkos, but he said you could bring your korban toida on Sukkos. My question is, Amos, when is this that you're going to bring it on Sukkos? If you think it's going to be Yom Tov itself, how can you say it? But you just said b'lei b'atzeret, and there's Yom Tov, you can't bring it on Shavuos because it's Yom Tov. Why would Sukkos be any less? As we explained already before, it's talking about the intermediate days, then you could bring your korban toida. Fine. The next opinion in the Beitzah was, Rabbi Shimon, he says, it says in the pasuk, b'chag hamatzos u'b'chag hashvuos u'b'chag hasukkos. Now, his words were, kosher ba b'chag hamatzos, whatever could be burned on Pesach, ba b'chag hashvuos u'b'chag hasukkos can be burned on Shavuos and Sukkos. V'chosher le ba b'chag hamatzos, whatever cannot be burned on Pesach, because it's putting them all together. In the ba b'chag hashvuos u'b'chag hasukkos not be burned on Shavuos or Sukkos. So like we said, it sounds like that he's coming to say that you cannot bring your Dam and the Davis not only on Pesach because of chametz, not only Shavuos because Yom Tov, but even Chol Shemoyim and Sukkos you can't, because it's comparing it to Pesach, which you can't. Because if not, what's he coming to add differently? However, the problem is, Masechta Beitzah says, how can you say that you can't bring your korban toida on Chol Moed like the previous Tana said? Hashta, if Reb Shimon that's saying it's forbidden, so Lucy Misaltina, you're telling me you're allowed to gather wood from the fields when it's connected to the ground on Chol Shemoed, because that's a bryce and might cut up your base and base. You're allowed to cut the wood from where it's attached on Chol Shemoed for the purposes of Tzarchei Moed, Tzarchei Yom Tov, and the Dam and Davis. Do I have to tell you can bring the Dam and Davis? How could you say that you cannot bring the Dam and Davis, but you could go ahead and cut off wood that's attached on Yom Tov, on Chol Shemoed? So Mabai says, no, you're right. Bakrava kulamale pliga deshari. No one disagrees, like the Tanna Kama said, that you're allowed to bring your korban toida on Chol Shemoed. Ki paligi, you know what the machlekes we're talking about over here is lamekim aleh b'bal ta'acher. We're talking about something very different. The whole Beitzah is actually discussing regarding the laws about ta'acher, which, just a quick introduction, Bal ta'acher is learned from a pasuk. You see the net l'Hashem akecha lo yisa'acher l'Hashem, like we said. Chama learned from this pasuk that it says, Shalosh pam b'shana yirah chol zachuchas p'nei Hashem akecha b'chag hamatzos b'chag hashvuos b'chag hasukkos. This is the time that must elapse before one is over the lav of Bal ta'acher. So this pasuk that's being brought over here is actually in the context of Bal ta'acher. Now, the machlekes in the Beitzah is the machlekes of your korban toida you want to bring, of delaying it. When is it considered you violated the Issa Bal ta'acher? That's the machlekes. Tanna Kama saver, so the Tanna Kama held Sholosh Regalim Amar Achmanu. The Torah tells you 3 Yom Tovim: Chag HaMatzos, Chag HaShavuos, Chag HaSukkos, which is a filish like a sidron, even not in order. Tanna Kama holds that whoever delays his neder 3 Yom Tovim, even not in the order, can be able Baal Ta'acher. And the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah Daf Amud Beis learns out the reasoning from this pasuk that it says Shalosh Pa'am Bashana. Question is, if it already said 3 times a year, you have to come and bring your karbanas. So why does it then mention the 3 of them? Chag HaMatzah, Chag HaShavuos, and Chag HaSukkos. If it already said Shalosh Pa'amim, obviously these are the 3 times, because that's what the pasuk was talking about over there. Because earlier in the psukim it was talking about Shemes Chodesh Aviv. So it spoke about Pesach, Shabbat Shavuos Tisbalach, it spoke about Shavuos, Chag HaSukkos Taslach. So already know the 3 times is why you're repeating the 3 Yom Tovim again. Oh, obviously it's coming to teach us regarding Baal Ta'acher, to say that these are the times I set for you to pay up the gifts and your nadar. Oh, so therefore, that's what the Tanna Kama, you know what the Tanna Kama was saying? Interesting, not what we would have thought originally what the Tanna Kama was saying. He was actually just giving you a good counsel, a Eitzah Taiva. He was telling you, if you have a carbon taidam, bring it on Sukkot. If you look at the words of Tanna Kama, like the second line from the top of the Amid, when he says, you can't bring the Torah Chag HaMatzah because that's Chametz. You can't bring on Shavuos because Yom Tov. When he said, maybe Adam Todasa B'Chag Sukkot, you know what he was saying? He was saying, I'm giving you a good idea. You're coming to the base of Mikdash 3 times a year for Aliyah Regel. Bring the carbon Torah when you're coming Sukkot, even if it's the first Yom Tov, after you made the Nedis. You usually say, Boss, I just want to bring it now. No. If you don't bring it now, you know what's going to happen? You're going to have to make a special trip to come to Yerushalayim. You know why? Because when you're going to come for Pesach, you're not going to be able to bring it. When they chametz Shabbat, because it's chametz in it, so you're not going to be able to bring it then. You're not going to be able to bring it Shavuos because you're staying just for Yom Tov, and Yom Tov you're not allowed to bring the drum and the davos. Comes out, according to the Tanna Kama that holds that Baal Ta'acher is any 3 Yom Tovim, you delayed 3 Yom Tovim without bringing it. So bring it on Sukkot because, for example, if let's say you made the neder after Pesach, you have Shavuos, Sukkot, and Pesach, you already divided Baal Ta'acher. So bring it on Sukkot even though it's not yet the 3rd Yom Tov because you're going to be stuck, because you're going to have to make a special trip back. So that's why it says bring it on Sukkot. Then Reb Shimon came along, Reb Shimon Savani held, no. Kisidron in. It's the order is specific. It's the 3 Yom Tovim in the order that the Torah says that you violate Baal Ta'acher. Shalei Kisidron Lai. If it's not in order, then you're not. So therefore, let's say if someone made a neder before Sukkot, he has time till the coming year, and that's what he said when he quoted the pasuk that says B'Chag HaMatzah, B'Chag HaShavuos, B'Chag HaSukkos, and he says whatever is brought on Pesach, meaning what he meant to say was, if you took a neder before Pesach and you was it responsible for you to bring it on Pesach, then you could bring it on the Shavuos afterwards or the Sukkos afterwards, and you don't have any more time. That was his point. When he said whatever's not brought on Pesach, it wasn't like we interpreted before, Azah Hekesh Azah, you can't bring it because Chumetz can't bring a Pesach, you can't bring it Shavuos and Sukkos. That wasn't what he was saying. He was saying that if you can't bring it on Pesach, meaning that it's not your responsibility to bring on Pesach, meaning, what does that mean? Because you took the neder after Pesach, then it's not brought. In other words, then you don't have to bring it. His idea was you don't have to bring it, not the next Shavuos and not the next Sukkot. So it's not like you can't. He was saying you don't have to, because you have time till the Sukkot of the following year, because it's only when it goes through in the order like we have over here in the chart. So for example, if you made it after Pesach, let's say, you're going to have Shavuos, Sukkot, you're not starting to count yet. You're going to start counting only by Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. So when he said that if it's not brought on Pesach, it's not brought on Atzeres and on Sukkot, I mean that as I isser as I can just bring you whatever. No, he's saying you don't have to. If you didn't have to bring a Pesach because you took the neder after Pesach, we're not starting to count from Shavuos. And then Rabbi Shimon, he was the 3rd opinion. He said maybe Adam Todasa B'Chag HaSukkos. He says a person brings his Todah on the Yom Tiv of Sukkot. Now, question is Emas. When was he saying that you bring it on Sukkot? Ilam b'chol hashamayt. If you're saying chol hashamayt, the Tanna Kama already said you could bring it. Ella, and this is actually the point we're bringing out, meaning besides the point of Baal Ta'acher that they're disagreeing about, inside these words you're also going to see the machlekes tanim that we mentioned before, if Nedam and Nedavos are created Yom Tov, because when he's saying you bring it on Sukkot, obviously it doesn't mean chol hashamayt, because Hainu Tanna Kama already said you could bring a chol hashamayt shel Sukkot. And L'bi Yom Tov, rather obviously he says you can bring it on Yom Tov because some of the Nedam and Nedavos created Yom Tov because he holds you could bring this neder of your taida on Yom Tov, and that is the machlekes tanoim of Tanakama and Reb Shimon, which was the machlekes tanoim that we pointed out on Amud Aleph to explain for Ula that Ula is going like that Tana, but yeah, it's a machlekes if you bring your shlamim, which is what a taida is, on Yom Tov. Now, wait a second, we're not finished yet explaining his opinion. We just wanted to point out that in his words you see that you could bring your shalmei neder on Yom Tov itself, which is the machlekes tanoim, but we're still bringing in the Brisa, and once we do, we're explaining it. So wait a second. Rabbi Shimon, why did he say that you could bring your taida on Sukkos? What does he mean to say when he's saying that? If we're saying all in the context about Ta'achar, so the Gemara says, I'll tell you why. Rabbi Shimon he's going according to his reasoning. In the Brisa, Rabbi Shimon he says, and this is Rabbi Shimon first. We're not talking about Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon says, and he was the opinion that we said that it has to be in order. So this Brisa is according to Rabbi Shimon that he says Lo Yom Echag HaSukkos. The truth is, when the pasuk went to repeat again, and it says that when it's talking about the 3 Yom Tovim for the Isabal Ta'achar, really it didn't have to say U B'Chag HaSukkos, because you already told me Shalosh Pam Bashana, and you said Chag HaMatzos, Chag HaShavuos. Of course, I know that you were talking about Sukkos, because it's in there in the parsha of Sukkos that you're talking about when you're writing Hakasa Medabah. This pasuk of Shalosh Pam Bashana is in the parsha of Sukkot. You already spoke about Chodesh Aviv, you spoke about meaning Pesach. Then you spoke about Shiva Shavuos, about Shavuos. Then in Sukkot is where this pasuk about Ta'achar is talking about. And you already said Shalosh Pam Bashana, and then you again say Chag HaMatzos, Chag HaShavuos. So I know that the third one here is Sukkot that I'm still discussing. So why does it say Uva Chag HaSukkos? Says Rabbi Shimon, leave it to say Shazeh Achron, that this has to be the last one. And that's why we say it at the last one, and that's where Rabbi Shimon gets his opinion that has to be Kisidron, has to be in the order. If you recall, we had 3 Yom Machlekes. Tanakama says it's any 3 Yom Tovim. Shimon said no, it has to be in that order, and this Brisa explained the source of that. Rabbi Shimon says no. I'll tell you why it says Chag HaSukkos. Leimut Tazeh Shezeh Goyrim. Sukkos is the one that causes Bal Ta'achar. So even if you took your neder right before Sukkos, once the Yom Tov Sukkos passes, you can be over on the lav of Bal Ta'achar. That's why he picked specifically to bring your toy down Sukkos, because no matter what time of the day, time of the year you went and took your neder, even if it's, let's say, only 2 Yom Tovim, or 1, you'd be over on Bal Ta'achar. So that's why he says to bring it on Sukkos, because that's the one that depends on. So if you took it before Pesach, fine, you'll have 3 Yom Tovim. Before Shavuos, you'll have 2. Before Sukkot, you'll have 1. But that's why it says Ubechag HaSukkos, even though it wasn't necessary, because we knew we told Chag HaSukkos, to tell you, either according to Rabbi Shimon, that it has to be the last one, or according to Rabbi Shimon, who he was the third opinion in this Brisa about Ta'achar, to say that that's the primary one. But again, that's what we said, that you see this Machlekes Tanoim of Amud Aleph here in this long discussion of do you bring your Shalmei Nadav, you bring your Ned and Nadam of Shlamim on Yom Tov. Now, in his words, in Rabbi Shimon, he said, V'yitzeba mishum simcha, that you will fulfill your obligation of simcha, meaning of shalmei simcha, because like you recall, we said there's 3 karbanos you bring on Yom Tov, there's oilus re'iyah, shalmei chagiga, and shalmei simcha. So you'll fulfill your obligation of simcha, but ve'ein yitzeba mishum chagiga, you're not going to fulfill your obligation of shalmei chagiga. This is my pshita, which we had used to explain previously as halacha. The Gemara takes it as for granted. Bringing a shalmei chagiga is obligatory. It says v'chagoysim v'chag l'Hashem. But anything that's obligatory, any can only come from something that's unconsecrated. You can't use it from Meiser Sheni monies. You can't use them in the Dharma Davis, which you're already obligated. So what's the chiddush of even saying this in Rabbi Shimon? Says the Gemara, it's necessary with the afagav the parish. Even if he specified when he was making the neder of the taida, he specified, I'm only bringing this taida on the condition that I could use it to fulfill my obligation of chagiga. That is the case that we're telling you, no, Alpha Pika, you're not going to be able to fulfill your obligation of Shama Chagiga with that. Which is, as we find, Kedebayim and Reb Shimon ben Lakish ben Yechon, as Rish Lakish asked from Yechon. If someone says, okay, I want to bring a Krabbat Taida, Thanksgiving offering, Rabbi Shalom Baruch was good to me, making a Suda Saidah, let's bring Krabbat Taida. But, Yom Tov's coming up, funds are tight, the job's not what they used to be. I want to have It's about the Chagiga. So, I bring in a Taida, but, Kim Fasikas, Yerushalayim, but I want to have that, let it at least be my Shama Chagiga too. Or let's say another case, Harini Naz. He says, look, I want to be a Naz. Heilig Izach, Nuze, Languhu, Okay, mikveh yedutug. I want to be a nazir as getinta b'chav menalf, but lagalach memois meiser sheni. I want to have. There are certain karbanas that the Torah requires on the nazir when he's shaving off his hair. He says, "Look, I can't afford it. I'm living off the other people. I have meiser sheni monies anyway. Let me use those meiser sheni funds to use for those karbanas." Now, what's Allah? That's what Shlakish asked regarding these two cases of Yechon. So Malay, so Yechon said to him, look, he says, Nidar, it's a vow that he took on the Taida, and he cannot fulfill his obligation of Chagig with it. And so to Nazir, he is a Nazir, and he cannot cut his hairs and use the funds of Meiser Sheni funds because it has to come from Chulin. Because as Rashi explains, the moment you said Harei Lai, so you already became obligated. Because Amir Legavaya, when you say something to Hashem, is Kimasilah, it's like you already gave it over. When then you subsequently say Amanas, so that's not significant. Which Tosfos points out specifically in that order. Because if you said it the other way around, well, okay, so then that would be okay. But if you're saying in this order, you already became obligated, and Amanas is already too late. And therefore you cannot go ahead. And that's the chiddush of the case when we said in Relation of Shimon that you're not fulfilling the obligation of Chagiga, even though you said Amanas. It doesn't make a difference. You're not going to be able to bring it. But of course, if you didn't say Manas, the Dava Pasha, Dava Shabachayba cannot be brought from another Dava Shabachayba. It will only be brought from a Chum. And the Gemara brings the story to finish this off. Hu Gaver da Amalahu. There's a certain person that said to the people around him where he was on his deathbed, he was passing away, and he says, do me a favor, give 400 zuz to that man. And let him marry my daughter. He says, take all those rubles, think about his tachtel, and says, give it to that man, let him marry my daughter. So the same idea, I'm going to pop it. Says Abba Meir Shakel. Yeah, the guy will take the $400. Ubrate and the guy's daughter, Ibay Nasr, if he wants to marry her, fine. Ibay Loy Nasr, if he wants to, he doesn't have to marry her. Because as the Gemara explains, time in the Amar Havulei Valenza, because he first said give it to him, and then he says let him marry her. So what he said is done. But the next thing is if he wants to. But if he said Linsiv, but if he said let him marry her and give him the money. Then he then he marries her, then he takes the money. But he doesn't marry her, then he doesn't take the money. As the Gemara brings one more story. Similarly, just finishing off this topic, Merema was saying over this teaching of if someone says Harei Lai Toida, but I want to fulfill my obligation of Chagiga with it, that we said that it's not going to be effective. He said over Mishmei Denafshe in his own name. I mean, he didn't say like it was a question. He was just saying on his own. This halacha Harei Lai Toida Beitzah de Chagiga. Or it's a neder and he doesn't feel obligation. He's a nazar and he cannot go ahead and cut his hair. So the Ravina said to Merema, who was saying over this teaching, says, Atun hachamas nitula. You're saying it over on your own, like as if it wasn't the name of a Beitzah. But Anan us, we have it that it was a question that Rish Lakish asked from Yechana, and that it was a response that Yechana gave to Rish Lakish. Again, this halacha that we said was the chiddush of Beitzah Shimon, that you cannot fully obligation in Chagiga, where even though you said Amanas, but what you said first was already effective, and then the second thing that you say is not going to be because that's already secondary, and it's not significant, and the person could choose to marry or not. Thank you to any time. Those things.